Welcome to Watchman on the Wall, a daily outreach of Southwest Radio Ministries and SWRC.com. God is still on the throne, and prayer changes things. Today, we begin a brand new series examining the spiritual battles that shape our world with Derek and Sharon Gilbert. And then later, Marvin McIlvaney will have the latest headlines from the end times. SWRC.com is the online home of our brand new video podcast, Marginal Mysteries, Biblically Grounded, and Moment of Prophecy. Get caught up today by visiting SWRC.com and click on Watch. That's SWRC.com, then click on Watch. SWRC.com also has the latest resources examining Bible prophecy, biblical mysteries, and archaeology of the Holy Land, encouraging articles, and the latest insight into the headlines from the end times. All this and more can be found at SWRC.com. Check it out today. SWRC.com. Here's Dr. Larry Spargimino with today's guest.
Friends, have you ever looked at history and current events with utter amazement? Have you asked yourself, why is this happening? Who is behind all of this? Is all of this part of some grand scheme to dethrone God and completely eradicate His people? Sharon and Derek Gilbert, husband and wife researchers, have dug deeply into science fiction, ancient history, and the Bible to write a stunning book, a book that I'm holding in my hands right now. The title of the book, The Gates of Hell. The Gilberts have produced several books, Veneration and Giants, Gods, and Dragons, that bring to us the reality of the world of darkness. Indeed, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And that is true in so many ways. Sharon and Derek Gilbert, so nice to have you on the show again.
Thank you so much.
It is an honor to be here.
Well, I'm going to kind of start simply. There's a lot of simple things, but also profound things. But to start off, tell us about your title. It uses words that we might not be familiar with. For example, demonic portals, Mount Hermon, the Ganymede Code. Maybe tell us all about that, and of course the United States Capitol.
There is it appears to be an occult prophecy that is encoded into the art and architecture of the United States Capitol. This may come as a shock to Americans, very patriotic. We like to think of America as a Christian nation, and I think it was founded that way originally by the original pilgrims at the Plymouth colony, But boy, by the time you get to the 19th century and some of the art and, again, just the architecture of the U.S. Capitol, even the name of the Capitol derives from pagan sources that date back to the Roman world. You know, Tom Horn kind of opened the door with this, with his books, Zenith 2016.
Zeitgeist 2025.
Zeitgeist 2025. We've taken it and I think developed it. So we're really standing on the shoulders of a giant there in Tom Horn. When you look at that, look at what has happened recently with the great conjunction of 2020 and compare it with ancient rituals that date back to what occurred in the prehistoric era, the pre-flood era on Mount Hermon, and I think there's we think there's a definite connection there.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there are a couple of things. One of them is that Solomon wrote, "There is nothing new under the sun."
Right.
In other words, things that happen will happen again. So nothing that we're seeing is new. It's just new to us. And so if we dig into the past to help us understand the signs that we're seeing now, then we start to see this pattern. Derek and I have been watching this pattern emerge for years. And you mentioned, Derek, the conjunction of 2020, and I'm betting most people do not know what you're talking about.
This was what was referred to by many in the media as the
Christmas
star, because it was a conjunction between the planets Jupiter and Saturn on the winter solstice of 2020, December 21st. It was a really interesting astronomical event when you see two of the bright planets in the night sky coming together within a half a degree of one another. This was the closest observable conjunction of those two planets in 800 years. But astrologers, and just to be clear, we as Christians do not believe that the movement of the planets in the sky at night have any bearing whatsoever on our fortunes and our futures. But very important, powerful people do. I mean, most notably for conservative American Christians, Nancy Reagan would set President Reagan's schedule based on consultations with her astrologer, Jean Dixon.
Well, that takes it way too far, but there are signs that we're told to look for. The sun and the moon are mentioned. The stars are mentioned, the host of heaven. When this conjunction occurred, it was as if Jupiter and Saturn were getting together. Jupiter, also known as Satan, Baal is another name for him, the storm god, is the head of the pantheon in this entire world. Satan's ruled the world. Jesus never said, you can't offer me the world, you don't have it. He simply said, don't test the Lord your God. When we see this sign of this conjunction, as if Saturn, Kronos, is coming back and Jupiter, Zeus, is handing over the control, because, well, frankly, Kronos/Saturn is also called Shemyaza in the Book of Enoch. And he's in Tartarus. So why would he get to come back? Well, funny enough, on the Epiphany of January 2021.
January 6th.
Of 2021. Something strange happened in the Capitol, which Derek talked about earlier as being named after a pagan deity, a pagan installation on
the Temple of Jupiter in Rome.
Yes, exactly. Capitol. That's why it's O-L and not A-L. Something interesting happened. Not only was there a so-called insurrection, and I do mean so-called, but we see this person come in wearing horns, for goodness sake.
Right.
That is the typical image of Kronos.
It is. Kronos, according to scholar Nicholas Wyatt, his name is based on the Semitic word karen, which means horns, like the horned one.
Like a bull.
His Canaanite iteration, this entity was known by many names throughout history. This was the subject of my previous book, The Second Coming of Saturn. Saturn, Kronos, El of the Canaanites, Enlil of the Babylonians and Akkadians and Sumerians, all the same name, same entity under different names. The Canaanites referred to him as Bull El, and it was believed that Mount Hermon was essentially his version of Mount Olympus, where he met and held court with his 70 sons, the gods of the nations. So on January 6th, in the Capitol, the building named for the Temple of Jupiter in Rome, who, as Sharon mentioned, you look at the clues in Scripture, beginning at verse 22, where he's confronted by the Pharisees, Jesus confronted by the Pharisees, accused of casting out demons by the power of Baal, Beelzebul, Baal the prince. That's the Canaanite version of Jupiter. Jesus says, if Satan casts out demons by his own power, how will Satan's kingdom stand? He's divided against himself. So Satan is Jupiter, is Zeus, and yet Thomas Jefferson insisted when the Capitol be built, rather than calling it Congress House, which is what the architect wanted, he said, nope, we need to name it for the Temple of Jupiter in Rome. Now, that doesn't mean Jefferson was a Satanist or anything like that. I think he just wanted to evoke the glory of the Roman Republic.
He did.
But on January 6th of 2021, this horned guy, the QAnon shaman, led this alleged rebellion, insurrection, especially those on the left, as a desecration of our temple of democracy.
They said that so many times.
Wow.
Right. And when we look at the art on the roof inside the Capitol Dome, visible from the rotunda, when visitors come in, you look up, you see the painting called the apotheosis of Washington, George Washington becoming a god. And when we look at the symbolism embedded in this painting by Romiti in 1861, the purple cloak around Washington's leg, purple being a symbol of royalty, the fact that he's surrounded by pagan deities, and the fact that this was directly above what had been a hole in the floor of the rotunda that looked down into a chamber off of the crypt below the rotunda, where Washington's body was to have been kept. This really symbolizes, through the oculus in the dome, the literal ascension of George Washington. But I think the symbolism, and again, credit to Sharon for putting me onto this really symbolizes the re-emergence of the old god Saturn and the return of a golden age, which was written about by the Roman poet Virgil 40 years before the birth of Jesus.
It's interesting, in the painting, Larry, it looks as if Washington is seated in the spot where you would expect Zeus to be. However, because his legs are bound this way, he's actually representing Saturn, because Saturn's legs are supposed to be bound in Tartarus.
Yeah, in the temple of Saturn in Rome, his legs were wrapped in wool, except during the Saturnalia.
When he got to come out.
When he got to come out. Washington symbolizes that, and then, again, the Ganymede code is another bit of symbolism there, a minor deity, a minor figure in the Greco-Roman mythology.
But he plays a big part in that painting.
Yes, he does.
And in other imagery in the rotunda.
Yes. Ganymede, very briefly, because I know we're blathering on and on here, is represented in that painting, the Apotheosis of Washington, as young America, depicted as a young figure with the grain god wearing a Phrygian cap, which is how Ganymede in the Greek myths were depicted. Ganymede was a very handsome youth who was carried off to Olympus by Zeus in the form of an eagle.
Exactly. An eagle kidnapping this boy and taking him up to Mount Olympus to be his little friend. His
special friend.
Yeah.
The myth is usually cleaned up for human consumption,
but he's
for
acting as the
modern
cup
consumption.
bearer.
Yeah, and there was some imagery connected to the carrying of the water cup for the gods, but he was carried off to be Zeus's boy toy, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when he was placed in the sky as the constellation Aquarius, which gets us back to the Great Conjunction, because astrologers say the Great Conjunction on the winter solstice of 2020 marked our official full entry into the age of Aquarius.
Hence the age of Ganymede. And if Ganymede is represented in this painting as young America, think of how Ganymede, what his position was relative to Zeus/Saturn when Saturn comes out.
Satan, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, Satan uses America for his own ends.
Well, friends, you can have your own copy of The Gates of Hell by calling our toll-free number 1-800-652-1144. This book will really take you where not too many of us have gone. It will take you into a world that is very, very real, but few know anything about it. The title of the book, The Gates of Hell. To get your own copy, 1-800-652-1144. You know, Sharon and Derek, as you were speaking, I was thinking of the word portal, or the words demonic portals. I think we're talking about a door, a passageway between two realms or two dimensions of reality, portals to the netherworld. And haven't there been specific areas that are associated with demonic activities, perhaps in the areas of these portals? Tell us about that portal concept.
Yeah, Jesus actually pointed to that right from the very beginning of his ministry. We spend a lot of time in the early part of the book, The Gates of Hell, on this region of Bashan, which is north and east of the Sea of Galilee, the Golan Heights today, but also the Upper Galilee, the region between the Sea of Galilee and Israel's northern border, which is Mount Hermon, was known to be supernaturally supercharged, not just by the Israelites, but by the ancient Canaanites as well. There are Canaanite myths that point to the Sea of Galilee as a region where the underworld gods, the Rephaim, were present, and it was a place of honor to be buried there because the kings of the Canaanites aspired to join the Rephaim after death. These were the demigod heroes of old. Jesus, we believe, was not baptized where the United Nations, where the Kingdom of Jordan thinks it's being buried, where it's baptized. There's a site across from Jericho where the King of Jordan is spending $300 million to develop a tourist location, and God bless him for doing it because Jordan doesn't have a lot of economic resources other than the biblical history. But the Bible tells us, according to the Gospel of John, that John the Baptizer was baptizing in Bethany across the Jordan, which means east of the Jordan River, but there is no Bethany other than the one on the Mount of Olives. But the Greek in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, is Bethania, and a scholar back in the 19th century by the name of Claude Condor, who was looking for this location, said this probably is the Greek transliteration of the Latin name Botania, which is Bashan across the Jordan.
Wow.
This was an area known in the ancient world as the literal entrance to the netherworld, and that's where Jesus was baptized, north of the Sea of Galilee, near the site of ancient Bethsaida, and it just so happens there's a megalithic structure on the bank of the Jordan, half a mile from ancient Bethsaida, that nobody knows about, and even the Israelites don't know about this.
We are just a couple of I think, didn't Doug Van Dorn go with us too,
yes,
as well as Aaron?
Right.
We went there, and it's very, very few people know about this, and even fewer have visited it. Aaron got this wonderful drone footage of it from the air. It's incredible footage, right on the Jordan River. Beautiful location, but it's a structure that looks like Gilgal Rephaim.
Mm-hmm. Concentric circles around a central tomb or tumulus dedicated to the ancient cult of the dead. The bank of the Jordan there slopes down about 75 to 100 feet down to the level of the river, making like a perfect natural theater for a group of a large number of people, like maybe 4,000 or 5,000, to sit and listen to a preacher. Yes, But
there's also that petroglyphs inside the dolmen, the center.
In the center, two petroglyphs have been found, but one of them is in the shape of a fish.
As if it's memorializing something that happened there?
Yeah.
Wow. That is significant. You know, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about our Lord's declaration at Caesarea Philippi, I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. You quote Josephus, the ancient Jewish historian, who speaks about this cave with a steep drop-off or precipice, and if anyone tries to measure the depth of the earth, no length of cord is long enough to reach it. Did Jesus make this declaration in Matthew 16 right here in this spot? Because this was perhaps a portal to the netherworld. So right here, Jesus was uttering a challenge, spitting in the eye of the devil, if you will, that he is building his church and his church will never be destroyed. Is that kind of a proper idea? Am I on the right track?
Absolutely right, because it was at the base of Mount Hermon, which again was sort of the Canaanite Olympus, and when he made that declaration, he was baptized at the south end of the Jordan River there in Bashan across the Jordan, at the north end of the Jordan, which emerged from that cave, the Grotto of Pan, Paneas, Caesarea Philippi. He declared his divinity, and then according to Matthew, 6 days later, he climbed a very high mountain, which can only have been Mount Hermon, because it's the only one in the vicinity of Caesarea Philippi, along with James and John and Peter, and was transformed into a being of light. So Jesus, yes, was definitely poking the spirit realm in the eye and saying, here I am.
So much. And by the way, that area is going to start heating up. It is close to Lebanon up there. It's very close to Syria. As of this morning, it's being reported that Israel's IDF has been going into an area right there on the border between Bashan and Syria, and they are clearing the landmines. Now, when we were there, one of the things that Aaron mentioned is you have to be really careful as you drive through or walk through, because there were landmines. And the local wild pigs would go through, and they didn't weigh enough to set them off. But when they would find them as they dug, they would just toss the landmines into the road. So now they are being cleared out, which means that the IDF plans to go in, ground troops, in that area.
Yeah. These are descendants of the pigs that the demons of Legion were cast into.
Actually, they probably are. Just wild pigs.
This is unbelievable. And I know you write on page 96, I think it's very significant in view of what we're speaking about. You say that Jesus telegraphed his intention to declare war on the giants right from the beginning of his public ministry. He chose the location of his launch party to make it plain to everyone with eyes to see just who was being put on notice. We're going to get deeper and deeper into this. It's phenomenal. Friends, we are about out of time for this first interview. Thank you, Sharon and Derek Gilbert. We want you back for our next show. There's so much more we can talk about. We'll continue to speak with Sharon and Derek Gilbert about their new book, The Gates of Hell.
The Gates of Hell, the brand new book by Derek and Sharon Gilbert, exposes an ancient enemy Jesus confronted at the start of his ministry, whose influence has shaped history and whose identity is hidden in plain sight. From his baptism site known as the entrance to the underworld, to the Transfiguration and Olivet Discourse locations, Jesus revealed the threat of this powerful entity, a figure possibly more dangerous than Satan. With research-driven insights, the Gilberts explored the dark forces' connection to Israel's conflicts, symbols in the U.S. Capitol, and the four horsemen colors on the Palestinian flag. The Gates of Hell uncovers a prophecy about America's future and the return of Apollyon, the destroyer. Order The Gates of Hell by Derek and Sharon Gilbert when you call 1-800-652-1144. That's 1-800-652-1144. You can also order on our website, swrc.com. Uncover the secrets Jesus confronted and discover the spiritual battles that shape our world. The Gates of Hell by Derek and Sharon Gilbert. 1-800-652-1144. Now that the election is behind us, things are settling down, right? Wrong. With the latest headlines from the end times, here is Marvin McIlvaney.
We read in Proverbs 29:2, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn." The Old Testament details the good and bad kings of Israel. Some kings were very good and took care of the people. They gave God the glory and sought His direction and guidance, and most importantly, His mercy. King David is considered one of the greatest kings in biblical history. However, he wasn't blameless. He saw Bathsheba, and he had to have her. He went so far as to have her husband, Uriah the Hittite, killed. King Solomon, David's son, is known for his wisdom, wealth, and building projects, including the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. King Hezekiah and King Josiah are also regarded as good kings of Israel. King Ahab is infamous for his wickedness, largely due to his marriage to Jezebel, a Phoenician princess who promoted the worship of Baal. King Manasseh was one of the most wicked kings of Judah. He practiced idolatry and engaged in child sacrifice. King Jeroboam and King Zedekiah are also listed among the worst. And so it is with American presidents. 8 years ago, Christians were wondering if Donald Trump would lead them out of the Obama desert. During Obama's term, he announced that the Department of Justice would no longer define marriage as only between a man and a woman. In the Illinois legislature, he opposed the Born Alive Infants Protection Act 3 times. The bill recognized babies born after attempted abortions as persons and required doctors to give them care. He couldn't even bring himself to protect infants brutalized and utterly alone in some medical facility, taking what might be only a few breaths on this earth. Donald Trump made a promise to Christians that came true after he left office. The United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, as President Trump's overwhelming re-election victory brings him back to power, many believe his return is more than an electoral mandate. Many believe it is a divine one. "We are rejoicing," said Jason Rapert, president of the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. He called it, quote, "a Red Sea moment in America," a reference to the book of Exodus in which God miraculously delivers his people to freedom. President Trump's conservative Christian coalition will have power at the highest levels of all 3 branches of government. Alongside President Trump in the White House, in Congress, Mike Johnson, the current and possibly future House Speaker, has placed evangelical Christianity at the center of his political vision. And the Supreme Court Mr. Trump helped create is ready to further reinforce religious rights. A pair of Christian students at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse went to a Kamala Harris rally. The pair were shouting, "Christ is King" and "Jesus is Lord," while getting shoved by some of the rallygoers. Eventually, Kamala Harris paused her speech and said to them, "You guys are at the wrong rally. I think you meant to go to the smaller one down the street." The crowd roared with approval. The moment went viral on social media. At one point, she ripped into President Trump for nominating 3 of the U.S. Supreme Court justices who helped overturn Roe v. Wade. Quote, "When Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom nationwide, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law," Harris said. In the time between President Trump leaving office and being reelected, President Trump faced at least 4 criminal cases. The January 6th case related to his so-called efforts to retain power after the 2020 election and the attack on the Capitol. The election case in Georgia related to efforts to reverse his 2020 election loss in Georgia. The classified documents case related to his handling of sensitive government documents he took with him when he left office, and the Manhattan hush money case related to payments to cover up a sex scandal during the 2016 presidential campaign. President Trump has said he had God on his side after narrowly surviving an assassination attempt. Pastor Lorenzo Sewell said that Jesus Christ himself saved Trump during the assassination attempt, preserving him for such a time as this. Reverend Franklin Graham said God spared Trump's life. President Trump's son Eric said that through the grace of God and divine intervention, he survived. Thinking about the story of Job, after losing his family and all of his wealth, he still praised God. Job said, "Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?" After all we've seen this man go through, and still be elected to the most powerful position in the world, it's hard to argue that God isn't involved.
The Gates of Hell, the brand new book by Derek and Sharon Gilbert, exposes an ancient enemy Jesus confronted at the start of his ministry, whose influence has shaped history and whose identity is in plain sight. The Gates of Hell uncovers a prophecy about America's future and the return of Apollyon, the destroyer. Order The Gates of Hell by Derek and Sharon Gilbert when you call 1-800-652-1144. That's 1-800-652-1144. You can also order the new book from Derek and Sharon Gilbert, The Gates of Hell, at our website, swrc.com. Friends, we're so glad you're here today. If you're a new listener to Watchman on the Wall, make sure you request your new listener pack. Inside, you'll find the latest issue of our Prophetic Observer newsletter and a special gift. Request your free new listener pack when you call 1-800-652-1144. That's 1-800-652-1144. Tomorrow, Derek and Sharon Gilbert will continue their look at the spiritual battles that shape our world. Be sure to tune in by downloading our free SWRC mobile app or by subscribing to our daily Watchman on the Wall podcast. Watchman on the Wall is a production of Southwest Radio Ministries and is supported by faithful listeners like you. Please visit our website today, swrc.com. That's swrc.com.